Dry, actually. Look, I just remembered. All right, so thank you for coming. It's a Friday, I know. It's been a wild week for myself, so if I say things that sound weird, it's because I'm tired. I started in San Diego on Monday, flew home on Wednesday, did Edison Awards last night. So I'm on this super high of seeing the most amazing creative things that are happening in the ed tech world. Balancing with I'm really, really tired. And I say really weird things when I'm tired. So if you hear something, just be like, oh, Treece, Roadcap, she can, y'all can grab me. Hey, time out. But in all truth, sometimes you got to get out and go see what's happening. I'm a big supporter of getting teachers out to other places and doing things, and that's been really hard, certainly with COVID. Pretty much everything shut down, and you know, a conference virtually is just not the same. You don't get to see and feel and interact and network like you do when you're actually on the ground at a conference. And this was a conference I would have never gone to outside of the organization that we work with, CAPS, which was the last session, the Center for Advanced Professional Studies that we work with and are in the network with, actually had tickets, and so they were trying to get as many CAP schools at the ASU GSV conference as possible. So I was able to get one of those tickets, and I shared with some of my folks, the first couple hours was a little overwhelming. It's probably one of the biggest conferences that I've ever been to, with 7,000 people and lots of sessions happening, not like 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. It was like 8 o'clock session, 8:15 session, and I like to go to all the sessions. So I'm like, this is not fair. Like, I went this session and I went this. So I was a little overwhelmed with not being able to get to everything. And some of the folks just said, you know, you got to pick what you want to go to and just bulldog those. And I'm so glad that I had somebody to help, because I felt a little lost for a moment. And I don't usually feel that way or overwhelmed, but in that moment for a minute I was. But the technology that I was able to see at that conference was just mind-blowing. I don't even have another way to describe it. You know, so when I hear parents say, you know, well, what worked for me worked just fine, you know, it'll be just fine for my kids, I just want to say, but it could be so much better. Like, maybe it worked, but it could be so much better. Like, if we can just embrace the tools and the technologies that are out there and understand that schools are going to look different and feel different, as they should, because the future is going to be different, we could really have some powerful, meaningful conversations in education to move, you know, what I call the proverbial ball forward. And I saw that this week. I mean, I saw schools that are making things happen and that are using technology to enhance the students' ability to personalize their learning, to grow academically where they need to focus on, to develop the durable skills that need to be developed. Skillsline was an organization that works with CAPS, and I actually got to meet them. And so this focus with America Succeeds on durable skills, and durable skills being things like communication, organization, you know, responsibility. What does that look like, and how do you grow that? And the exciting part for me was the last couple weeks, we were just finishing up our continuous improvement plan. In fact, Ms. Roadcap has been working as part of the parent representation on that group for that work. But in that, one of the components is going back and looking at how do we develop these habits of success or durable skills, you know, for students. You know, what does it look like in kindergarten versus 5th grade versus, you know, 8th grade versus 12th grade? And if I need to work on communication, then my specific goal should be just that. It should be communication, and it should be making eye contact when I'm speaking, and it should, so, you know, being able to quantify what the growth needed is, and then really collect that evidence and show that that growth is happening over time is important. But a lot of the conversation is how do you do that in a school? You know, how do you give students the opportunity to develop those skills? And I'm sitting over here going, PBL, like, I know the answer. And then they say the answer, which is, you know, PBL, and it's this, you know, that your courses have to really interact, and they have to be engaged and activated together. That, you know, science alone is just science, but science paired with, English and research and studying becomes so much more powerful than just, a worksheet checking off that I have some, low-level knowledge on a particular content and I know the vocabulary words. But in, these PBL opportunities and these opportunities where, students are, developing research in AICE. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about AICE is that it's so reflective of PBL. It just builds naturally, into those components. So that piece was pretty exciting for me to hear and make the connections to the technology. The amount of software that was there, you always see software. I mean, there's always Dreambox and Lexia and all the typical, ones, but to be able to see how AI is the AI world is mind-blowing, and it will change education. So people will either get on board or they will get left behind. I truly believe this is one of those technologies that you better figure out how to embrace it because it's coming no matter what. And if you aren't being proactive in your conversations and in your planning, and figuring out how to utilize it for students in a positive way, then I think it could be a long road hoe for people. But it was a good reminder. It was a good refresher for me because I admittedly sometimes get in the trenches and you're just trying to solve the daily problems, right? And it's like, all right, is this really the right work? Sometimes I can get in those moments where I'm like, I don't know if it's worth it. Like, this is really hard. Traditional school would be way easier. Like, is it worth the battles? And then you go somewhere where everybody you interact with is trying to do this work, and then you just get that spark. And so I'm tired, but I got a spark. I came back ignited for sure. My folks are probably glad I had other things going this week, so I didn't have to just download them, all the fun things. But it was a lot of fun, and it was a lot of reassurance to the work we're doing is very much in line with nationally what's happening and the movement that really is happening in education around competency-based learning. I've used standards-based grading because that really is old terminology now, so I'm going to have to figure out how to introduce that to parents and move towards the competency-based world. It's kind of like habits of success 5 years ago. That's kind of the words we were using, but really it's durable skills, transferable skills now. So updating some of that language is something that I'm going to have to do, but that really is where it's going. And I think COVID did exactly what we said it was going to do for schools. It was going to expose a lot of the hurdles that we have for parents to see, and now how do we fix it? And so there are a lot of people who didn't understand the hurdles that we were facing, and with COVID they did, and that really created some motivation for people to go, you know what, there's a better way to do this. And you're seeing those things coming out now. They're not perfect, but AI is definitely contributing. And when you talk about learning loss and COVID, you have a limited amount of time to get exponential growth out of kids. I mean, we only have them for so many days, and if they come behind a year, I can't keep them on track for the year and make up for the year that they missed. I mean, to make up a year of school is I don't even know if it's possible. I don't even know if research exists. I mean, when you have kids that are behind 1 and 2 grade levels, I mean, the research shows you're gonna make some gains, but nothing exponentially needs to happen right now, unless maybe you have the technology tools that can help enhance that and can provide that support, outside of the school day. And that's what these companies are really trying to look at creating. To hear from people like Bill Gates, whether you like Bill Gates or you don't like Bill Gates, the fact that he recognized before COVID the need for math. I mean, we always know math is a hurdle for us, but because math already had gaps and now we have even greater gaps, how do we solve that? And in his message, it was so true. We don't have enough good research to show what really works. Schools are doing their best to just deliver on a regular basis. Like, they don't have time to research and build things. So there's a lot of money being poured in to things like Dreambox, which we previously used, and I think we're probably going to go back to it after this year with Redbird. But it was encouraging to hear that the things that we're seeing and the things that we're pointing out are things that other people are seeing, and it is on the national stage. So just that's a little insight about kind of my week and how I'm coming into this session. And I would probably have included some different things in this if I would have had the time to do that, but I didn't. So I'll probably just ad lib some things in as we go through this. So this is pretty straightforward. Yeah, it's the user. It's kind of funny that I was at a tech conference with AI doing crazy things and I can't work a remote. That's a true statement. We'll do, as we always do, I'm going to do a brief overview of AICE and DE and why that's a priority for us, especially connected to our strategic goals and what it is that we're after for students ultimately as they become a trailblazer. We'll do some question and answers as needed. You all don't need a tour because you've been here, so we can knock that off the list. We talked last time about the academic skills being non-negotiable, but this concept of durable skills being developed alongside the academic skills so that when students leave and they either go to the workforce or they go to post-secondary education, whatever post-secondary route they go, they should be equipped. I have a personal philosophy that every kid that wants to go to college should have the skills to go to college. And that's just my personal, and I have a reason for that. I came from a very rural area where kids were very much tracked and labeled. And I saw a lot of students who I felt like were labeled incorrectly because of behaviors or because of lack of social interactions at home potentially. But they had the ability, but because they were in a track, they could not get out of that track a lot of times. So I am of the opinion that anybody who wants to go to college should be able to make their own decision on if they want to go, and it's the school's job to make sure that they're prepared for either choice that they make. So I could give a whole speech on that, but I will spare you the pain of that one. But ideally, when they graduate, what we are trying to do is really develop what is it that a graduate looks like from Babcock High School. When they walk across that stage, after spending 12 years in our system, what should that student know and be able to do, period? And how do they look and separate themselves when you go to FGCU? Oh, that's a Babcock student. You know, or if they're in the workforce, that's a Babcock student. Or, oh, I see Babcock on their resume, like we want to pull that one. What are we doing to set ourselves apart with the students and the clientele that we're graduating versus, you know, everybody else? That's meaningful. That's not, I mean, it's just not a checklist. It's, you know, what is it that employers are saying, what is the workforce development pipeline telling us needs to happen? So the collaboratory is very engaged in that work. I mean, it's not a surprise. There's a huge labor shortage. I don't know that will stop anytime soon in Southwest Florida. You know, so how do we look at those pipelines that need the most and get our students engaged in that process? That's where your internships and those types of things come in. But those things alone, you know, typically don't get you where you need to be. This thing hates me. There we go. All right, well, CJ, it totally has to be user error. All right, so this looks really tiny on that screen. All right, so the Cambridge AICE program, how many of you are familiar with that at all? Because this is going to be a brief overview of kind of the why behind it. So not the nuts and bolts of how the students get the diploma. They'll do that. Miss Sanford and her team, they do that on I know they just did one like 2 months ago. They usually do it at the beginning of the year and towards the end when we're onboarding students for the next year. But the Cambridge program, it was actually new to me when I came to Florida. I had heard of it, but in Kentucky, it was not something that we used as an opportunity for students to get college credits. In Florida, it's a game changer. I don't really know why as a school you would not offer it because of what it offers to students in terms of paying for college. If they can get that AICE diploma, it's a lot of money towards their education at the collegiate level. So for that purpose, I don't even know where it would be a discussion. I think it's a beautiful fit for what we're doing, and I want to tell you why that is. And that's because of how AICE is designed. It's designed around critical thinking, and developing those students, the skills for students that we're after. The critical thinking, the communication, the collaboration, solving problems, being able to process information. AICE is not necessarily here's your problem, figure it out. It's more of what problem do you want to solve? And then we teach you the steps to do it. so that no matter what problem that you're trying to tackle in your coursework, there's a set of standards that you're going to work through and a process that you're going to work through. Big reasons behind the why: the recognition and acceptance. It's pretty much accepted anywhere that you go. I mean, Cambridge, there's something to that, right? I mean, people know what Cambridge means when they hear that. So being able to have access to that on your transcript is, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. The part that I love is the rigorous and challenging curriculum. So for us, right now we are really infusing PBL at all levels, and that's going to continue. But what will probably happen with time is you're going to see the K-5 or K-6 a lot more heavy with things called PBL that are very driven by that PBL protocol and cycle that you go through. But the intent is that all of those skills developed there roll into your AICE curriculum here. It would be hard to probably do a PBL in an AICE course with all the things that are required in the AICE course. But again, it's the transfer of skills. It's developing what's needed there to be more successful here. So I think that's probably a natural, and I could be wrong, like I'm trying to predict the future, so it may be that we have enough happening that PBL is going to be strong and alive in both of the buildings. And in electives you'll see it, and in some of your other coursework you would see it, but in some of your like AICE courses you're not going to see as much of like a PBL unit happening or a PBL lesson happening. There could be plugins and connections, but as we grow, that's kind of a natural progression. The other piece, so that hopefully kind of comes over, that's the goal, and right now with AICE we're kind of doing the opposite. We're starting to go down to the elementary. So we've started AICE in the high school, with the intent of getting students those diplomas that they need to get the access to the college monies and scholarships and credits. But now we're starting to implement that in the elementary school. So we have a couple teachers at the elementary running pilot programs with the Global Perspectives class to really look at a crosswalk between PBL and AICE. So the actual Global Studies course goes all the way down to kindergarten. I mean, that's a class that can go all the way through. So we want to integrate that. It's just a matter of where does it fit and how do we not overload the teachers? So that's a balance. So we've got a couple teachers who are pretty solid, that are solid in PBL, that are going through one of the units just to see, does it mesh? How does it mesh? And maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's separate. I don't like things to be separate, so I would have a hard time with that. But I think there's a natural kind of crossover for some of that work to happen. So that ultimately you've got students that are exposed from K, all the way through to AICE. And again, not tracking students. The AICE program at the lower primary level is not intended to be anything about giftedness or, the smart kid versus not so smart kid. It's about everybody getting access to that curriculum and building that through your system. The flexibility is another big piece of it. Just having students have the opportunity to pick lots of different courses. Now, that is also limited based on size. When you have a school of our size, there's going to be some limitations to that. If you're going to, North, where they have 200 teachers and they can offer, a lot more variety, there's certainly going to be some different options. But I think within our system, we will be able to, much like we did at OASIS, we had a pretty big plethora of options for students. I don't know that anybody ever not got something that they wanted to be taking in the AICE program. But AICE does offer a lot of flexibility. It's everything from the global studies down to media, AICE media courses. So it does spread the gamut. The global perspective is a huge piece for us. I'll let them change classes real quick. I know they're actually really good. I say this every time. I know that it gets a little loud, but it's really not all that loud for a high school. Okay, I can't completely, let's see, I already hit global perspectives. Did I hit global? Flexibility, was I on flexibility? All the courses, being able to get dual enrollment. Did I talk about the testing with AICE, with the students? So they can take the AICE courses, and we want them to take the AICE exams. It doesn't hurt them to take the AICE exams. But the beauty in that is if they pass their AICE exam, they get the college credit that they're looking for as well. So that's one of the components that I also love about AICE as well. The global perspective, that's just a huge piece right now for everybody. I mean, to understand the global world and how that global world functions in academia and in world trade and economics. I mean, that's just a whole element that, that's an important piece no matter what, but AICE does a really great job of embedding that, and it gives students, especially through the Global Perspectives class, I love that course. That's a course where students actually can pick a topic and they dive into it and research something that they want to research. And you will see some really, really cool things come out of that where students have an interest sparked as they start learning things that they just didn't know, and you'll start to see even some passions created out of that in many cases. I got the first hand look at that at OASIS, and that was pretty powerful for me to see as an educator who had spent a lot of years trying to motivate kids for things, but to see them, engaged at the level that they were engaged at in some of those global courses, and especially global perspectives, was impressive. Professional development for teachers, the professional development that they provide is top of the line. It's costly, but it's also well researched. And well provided for. And because Florida is one of the leading states in the implementation, many of the trainings are here. So it doesn't take a lot. It's usually in Miami or Tampa or somewhere, but it's usually relatively easy to get teachers to those trainings. I apologize, that seems really small on the screen. I'll fix that for the next go around. So dual enrollment is also another option. I think they really do have to live together. We will also offer some AP programs here as well. You will see that some of the AICE course pass rates are pretty deplorable. And it's just because of how it's taught through Cambridge versus how we teach it. And so when students come through, like I'm trying to think, I think it was the biology one a few years ago. Students were just tanking it right and left. So you put them in AP biology and let them take the AP bio exam instead because the pass rate was higher and they could still have an opportunity to get that credit. So it really is looking at those options and kind of weighing which one makes the most sense for which course. Same with the opportunity to do, like a Comp 101, English 101, 102, to be able to do that on a local college campus or with an adjunct teacher in our building. Is a great opportunity to introduce them to that collegiate level work with the school level support that we can provide. We're not just turning them loose on a campus and letting them go. The idea with dual enrollment has always been that we start introducing students to that level of content, but more importantly, introducing them to the expectations around collegiate level work and what that looks like, because it is a little different than high school, but making that transition easier for success, because and it still happens. I mean, the data is pretty high for students who go to college their first year and don't finish or don't return. So the retention rate is always a concern. You want, if they're going to make that choice to go to college, you want to make sure that they're successful in that. So being able to provide dual enrollment for many schools, that was sort of the first attempt at, all right, how do we bridge some of this gap? If a student is not ready for AP, but maybe they are ready for some college level courses, how can we make that happen? So I actually at a school I was at in Kentucky, we were a very rural school, and most of our kids were going to be the first to graduate and actually get a diploma from high school, let alone go to college. And so we had put some parameters in place and actually had an agreement with Bellarmine University because the state started giving funds. They call it KEYS money. So for every A a student gets, they get $800, and for every B they get $700, and on down the line, so they can accumulate monies, and then those monies get to be spent in college. Well, some schools there in Kentucky just said, hey, what about us sending kids to college, and starting this dual enrollment adventure early, and can we use their funds that exist? If a kid really wants to take a class, could they use those funds to actually help offset some of the costs? So that became kind of a thing pretty quickly, and so we had to bus our students because we didn't have any professors that were willing to drive an hour out to us, and so we equipped a bus with Wi-Fi so that students could work while they were on the bus. And again, that was one of my first attempts at getting students dual enrollment, and to see students who were maybe categorized as struggling in our school but wanted to try the collegiate class and soared and did very well was just validation that you just got to be careful about putting kids in pathways and labeling them too early or pushing them too fast. I had some students who weren't ready for it. That we had to pull out of the program, but by the next year they had matured enough to get back in it, and they took a second stab at it. So it also can't just be well, they weren't successful the first time, we're never going to try that again. It has to be the right timing and the right place for a student. So all of these opportunities provide that. The advanced learning opportunities with dual enrollment again can be varied. We had a little bit of a time with FGCU trying to get our memorandum of agreement in place because of their rigidness. They wanted students to take these certain courses, and this is what it needed to look like. They were doing some pilots in Collier, but we're not there yet. We're in year 6, and so we're developing that with FGCU. But to have them really understand what it is that we're about, what it needs to align with, can get pretty tricky sometimes, and the cost is more. If I'm going to spend school money, it's going to be really hard for me to pay more money for this credit versus another credit when it's the same credit on the transcript. So we've had some of that dialogue back and forth, and we're working through some of those things. But they came back with a really great proposal 2 or 3 weeks ago that would allow our students not only to take your Englishes and the ones that you typically take, but some of the entrepreneurship courses as well, which is really what we wanted. We wanted to get them exposed to some of those courses that mimic what we're doing in here and are reflective of what we're about in this environment. So it looks like some of those things are going to come to fruition as well. It may take us another year to kind of get where we actually want to be. But opening those doors for students is a great gateway to getting them in the door at college if that's what their pathway is and that's what they want. And then also pairing that with the internships, making sure that what they think they want to go to college for is actually what they want to do. The dual enrollment also, just like Cambridge does, it's going to reduce college costs, bridges high school and college, and then increasing the college readiness. So, just really providing that firm foundation, no matter what type of student you are, no matter what it is that, you think you want to go do. We want to make sure that within our environment, even being small, that we have multiple pathways for that to be able to happen. So between Cambridge AICE and dual enrollment and a few AP that you'll see probably here and there, we'll be able to do that for our students. So really tying in, it's all the components, right? It's the PBL, it's the skills, it's the common, curriculum that we have to cover. But then it's, all right, we've got this graduate, what do we need them to be? And then in high school, expanding what we want those opportunities to be. So I get a lot of questions about, well, how come you do both? Or why not just do ACE? Why is ACE better? It really isn't that one is better than the other. It depends on the needs of the student. And it depends on the desires of the student and what the programs have to offer. I'm definitely a huge advocate for Cambridge ACE because of what it delivers, how it delivers it, and the engagement of the student. I think anytime that you can have a student highly engaged in the learning and thinking process and having to critically work through the problem and come up with some sort of answer and be able to defend it, I think that's just a crucial piece of education, and it's got to happen all the time. It should be happening consistently and ongoing, and that facilitates that type of learning environment. So it just naturally you're going to get rigor in those types of situations. I probably overuse the word rigor, but rigor isn't just higher level content. It's also applying that content to real world and making meaning of it. There's some different definitions of rigor. So just to be clear, I do think you got to have high-level academia, but high-level academia without being able to pair it in a real-world environment and make it meaningful and have a child be able to process that information and using it in a meaningful way is pretty pointless. If I'm just reading it and checking it off a list or regurgitating, as I say, sit, get, and regurgitate, for an assessment, that's not who we are at this moment, like while I'm here. I mean, somebody else may come in and say, it needs to go in a different direction, but when you have schools like the College Board that are now having discussions about how do we really gauge, student learning and project how they're going to perform based on these new models. And I can tell you I was in a meeting while I was in San Diego with some important people. I don't really know how I got in the meeting, but there was a lot of discussion around, is this the best way to really assess student learning at this point? Is it really the method that we need for schools that are doing things different? You see a lot of colleges now transitioning to portfolios. There's a huge emphasis on character, and you're going to see that, I think, probably trend more. The transcript is important. It's always important. They got to have the requirements. They're going to have to meet those, but most of your schools are looking for good quality people for their return. They want graduates too that are going to, provide return on their school. So we tell them all the time in here, character matters. Your service matters. Get out and volunteer. That's why volunteer hours are such a, big component with some of your programming, with your AICE programming and that AICE diploma. I mean, there are volunteer hours attached to that purposefully. When your administrators get the sheet about ranking a student, there's way more on those sheets about their character than there is about their performance. And it will say, if they've got a 4.0 but they didn't take a rigorous schedule, you have to check that. We have to verify that, what they were doing was a high level course. And, all of those components, but there are more questions about who they are as a person, what they've contributed to the school, than there are academia. Both important, but how they act and what they do here is equally important. When I've got an elementary principal who's asking for my support in sending home in the Friday, affirmation piece, to encourage or limit, or I don't know how he's going to word it, but so I don't want to put words in his mouth, but when the F word comes up so much in a K-5 building that you feel like you need to address that at home, that's very telling to me. That's telling to me where we are, and so I'm going to continue to emphasize, kindness matters, having a servant's heart matters, and, helping other people is going to matter just as much as some of the other things that we're teaching right now. So of course I gave my support, and I said, I'll write it for you if you want, and you can blame it on me. But if we're having to address that, but it's hard when you're driving down the road and there are signs, with F, K. Kids are hearing, they don't know what it means, because I asked him, I was like, well, are they using it he's like, well, they don't know necessarily what it means, but the fact that, I guess he had even a student actually write down F blank blank K. I didn't even ask what grade, because I was like, I don't even care. What, if it's a K-5 building. How, yes, address it. Yes, because I think it matters. It matters what we're creating. I can't control what happens outside the building. We can encourage it, but we can also set the expectation that that's just not allowed in our environment. That's not an okay place to be, or place to use the word. So all of these things are important, but there's so much more that's important as well that has to fold into it, because AICE, dual enrollment, or AP alone isn't going to get our students where they need to be, which is, I hope, been helpful with all of the series of kind of how we've walked through, why standards-based grading, competency grading matters, why project-based learning is important, why CAPS is important, that it comes along in the high school to support all the things with PBL, and same with CAPS, supporting what happens, for this collegial level academia or entering the workforce. Either way, students have to be equipped. They have to be able to read things and process and do things and communicate, and it all just has to work simultaneously. It really can't work in silos, just like our classrooms. I mean, you can't just do English in a silo and expect to get the rigor and the connections that we're looking for. You know, there has to be cross-curricular throughout the student's experience to make those connections meaningful. So I could talk forever, as you all know. I'm really terrible about doing that. So do you all have questions? Is there something that I've missed? Do I have holes? Yes, ma'am.
Not a hole, just a question. So you were talking about the AICE exams sometimes come back forward just because of the content, but do they have to pass that to get credit for AICE on the diploma?
They do.
So
it matters.
right. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, it matters. Which is why we would never put them in a situation where if there's a low pass rate, we just wouldn't offer that course the next year.
Okay.
We would replace it with something else because that would just, I mean, it wouldn't be productive for the student. So it will happen. Like we'll pull a class and there will be the Facebook, frenzy. They offered it last year, they offered it this year. Ask the question why, because the answer is either A, we don't have a teacher that can deliver it to get the pass rate that they would need, or the pass rate overall nationally has dropped because they've changed the test or something has happened and it's made it really hard to pass. Some of it is due to timing and the way that they teach there and like what they offer when that impacts the sciences. It usually hits the sciences harder than any of the other ones. That's the one that I've seen. We've had to rotate it a couple different times, but it's just the nature of, it's non-negotiable, like what they do, and I'm sure Amanda covers this in her session when she meets with the high school parents, but there is no negotiating. I mean, we can't even negotiate things with them. We have, you have to have a room where all the stuff is stored. It has to be 2 keys and only 2 people can have the keys and they show up random, like to do audits. They did show up, they always show up. They show up every year to do, just to make sure that you're following their procedures, and they don't mess around. If you get kicked out, you're not ever getting back in. So as we tell students, even with cheating, it's like it's not like you get to go back to the principal and beg for forgiveness and say, "Can I try again?" That's a hard no. It's just a no. You follow the rules, and that's it. Yes, ma'am.
I was confused on her question because I did go to that AICE meeting that Mrs. Sanford hosted, and I thought she said you can still get the high school credit for taking
Oh,
the
you
class.
can. You can get high school credit, not college credit. Sorry,
Yeah,
I thought you were talking about college.
I was talking about the AICE diploma. So totally different. So
You
like
have
to get that
the
stamp.
Yeah, you have
take
to
the
pass
test.
the exam to
Right.
get the.
Yes, sorry. That was I missed that.
I just want to make sure I was.
Yeah, no,
right.
you're good. You're good.
And then I did have a question. So on CAPS, AICE, dual enrollment, is there going to be some kind of guidance counselor or someone at the school level that's helping?
Let's hope.
Especially as they're in the high school
Yeah,
setting?
well, we don't because we've not been able to find one, which is super discouraging. We've had to make it pretty much all year without one. I cannot emphasize enough that our community has to treat our people well. We lost a really good counselor and we have not found one since. And we are having a difficult time getting the applicants across the board. We're gonna do sort of let's try to figure out how to get applicants, but I have 7 positions over there right now and we have no good applicants. We've never had that happen, ever. Like we've always had more applicants than we've ever needed. And we're holding on to, it's April, so we still have, there's still 2 or 3 months of the hiring season. But every time I'm with a group of parents, I cannot emphasize enough. Like we have to be cognizant, like what goes out publicly on things and what it reflects when it's not true doesn't matter. People Google it and read it and see it. And even if we're awesome and we're doing all the right things, if they're reading threads, it's counterproductive. And I don't really, I'm not great at politics. We all know this, but I'm just saying, we're going to cut our nose off to spite our face in some of this. And I won't say that's specifically what's happened with the counselor, but I do know we lost a really good counselor, and we've not been able to find one since. We have an interview with one on Tuesday, so we'll see. So yay.
But that person would more be charged with like the mental health of the students, right? Or would they?
Some,
also
school
help them
counselors are.
make these decisions
Yeah, school counselors are very much involved in the planning process, yeah. The mental health is typically, I mean, if there are some real crucial mental health like components, then that's a social worker that probably addresses that, which we also have a position for. It's not filled. The district is gonna work with us. We're gonna have one hopefully at least 2 days a week next year. But typically your guidance counselors handle all your testing that happens in a school and the guidance of students. Now, I will say I'm not an advocate for counselors handling testing, so we don't have that on the counselor role right now. And I don't know why that happens, but that takes away from what their actual role is. So right now Carrie is handling our testing coordinator stuff. We would like that to just be kind of a separate role because now that it's 3 times a year, I mean, you would not get anything done if you were doing those pieces all the time, but that's kind of moving the widgets. But to your point, you got to have people like that to make sure that it all connects, because if not, I mean, it's a series of things they're going through without a plan. But even though we have not had a counselor, I mean, Darcy Coleman has a past in counseling. I mean, she's in administration now, but she has led most of that here at the high school this year, or we've sourced it into classrooms as needed. But that's a big concern for me moving forward.
Do you feel like enrollment needs to increase substantially too in order to make some of these programs work going forward?
I have positions right now. Yeah, I have positions. I'm being super transparent, so
I'm sorry, I have a
no, that's all right. Listen, it is what it is, but I think we've got to attend to it as a community. I mean, it matters. Teachers can get paid anywhere. They're going to get paid the same here as they get paid somewhere else. So we've got to make sure it's an environment that they want to be in and that they want to be a part of. And the amount of money that we pour into teachers for professional development to, get them where they need to be with these things is exponential. So a teacher that walks out the door for me, I mean, it's a loss for kids in most cases, but it's also, a loss in all of the things that we've spent building for 3 or 4 years. So, yes.
In theory, if a kid was to optimize AICE and dual enrollment and all this, and they succeeded in it, by the time they graduate, how many college credits would you expect if they optimized it throughout?
I haven't actually calculated it on our schedule right now because sometimes you'll change schedules through the years. But I've had students graduate with associate's degrees before they got their high school diploma. So it's possible. Yeah. If the right student is motivated, they can definitely get there. Yep. Yep, 100%. Which if they are motivated, I would encourage them to do it because it's money savings and it's courses they got to have anyway. Yeah.
Coordinate everything, schedule everything.
Yeah. And making sure they can handle it. That's sometimes there's like socially, emotionally, they're not ready for it, especially if they're younger. Like we'll see that if they're a younger age student, hitting those courses a year can often make a big difference. So it's knowing your kid and, the teachers know the kids pretty well. They're with them, a lot. So typically, we get it wrong every now and then, but for the most part, we are pretty good about figuring out what makes the most sense for each kid to get them there, to get them as much as they can. That's our goal too. We want to see them as successful as possible. That's a reflection of what we're doing as well. So, we want them to get into those, courses as quickly as they can. Without, hurting them in other ways. Good question. You had more? Did you have more questions?
Well, I know.
Oh.
Okay. I do have one last one. I'm sorry. I'm excited by all these different initiatives, but just being like an entrepreneur, I know that usually you have to tackle one thing at a time.
We don't have time for that. We don't have time for that.
My concern is just
I hire people to help.
things at one time.
It's a lot. It is a lot. And it is overwhelming. It has to be the right teachers, right? And the right people. And that's my responsibility. I don't handle all of it, right? There's a person who's in charge of AICE. Yes, like CJ is in charge of IT. Like CJ has a very lengthy list of things that we want done and things that need to happen done. And CJ looked at me last year and said, "You're crazy. Like, there's no way. I'm one." No, he actually didn't. He just worked all night and kept it. I'm like, okay, well, this is not going to work. He can't work 24 hours a day. His wife's going to say, "Treece, you're a bad person." So we hired him help. So Christian came on board because we never intended to be a one-to-one school out the gate. That was all because of COVID. So COVID changed so many things for us that made us change, that just out of necessity. Some of it was great. Some of it we've got to figure out. It hasn't panned out exactly, I think, like we would want. But you it get the right people in the right places to make it happen because, unfortunately, or fortunately, I see it as fortunately, we have, in less than 6 years, 5 years ago, we were having construction on that elementary building. The growth here has been substantial, to say the least. It's not even close to what we were projecting. So that required us to pivot. It required us to look at things differently. And, honestly, it's an opportunity for us to offer more faster, which I'm totally fine with because my kid's in 6th grade, so the faster I can offer stuff and get her exposed, the better. I wouldn't put her anywhere else, even with some of the things that we aren't able to offer yet. I still think the experience that she gets here is far better than getting lost as a number in some other school. So some of it is a balance, and it's all about choices. I look at it from the educational standpoint, what they need, but I also look at it from a mom. How do we, as a mom of a 6th grader and a mom of a kindergartner, what needs to happen first and foremost. So yes, we prioritize. We have to. We can't do it all. I can promise you there are 10 more things I'd love to do because I bend all their ears about it all the time. But we've kind of picked these are the 4 or 5 things that are going to get us the most value for kids right now to get them where they need to be. I want Odyssey of the Mind yesterday. I've been trying for 4 years to get that launched. I would love to have MUN, the Model United Nations, also yesterday. Also the debate team. But you got to have the right person to get them launched so that they're successful. And even with TSA, one of the reasons right out of the gate did TSA is because of it spans all of those, right? So you can hit a lot of areas and engage a lot of kids, through a particular program. But that can't always be the only program. We've got to have other ways to touch kids and to get kids engaged in the work. CJ and I just talked before this session about the Texpedition that happened last weekend was phenomenal. I would have loved to had 25 kids in here at a minimum, but you got to have the right people in the classrooms to get kids motivated about those things, to get them to come to make it meaningful. So we have to prioritize, and that's what we've done. Even with those priorities, when a teacher comes on board, mastery, learning, competency-based, standards-based, that's all going to take care of itself because I think that movement is going to continue. That's not something that's going away. More schools are going to do that. Lee County's already started working on their rubrics and things. I don't know how you not do it, but so some of that training will get less as time goes on because people will come to us with some of that. But right now they don't. So we've had to prioritize our PD because we were just killing them. You got to do 4 days of PBL training, you got to do 2 days of Empower, and 2 days of capturing kids' hearts. Well, it was 10 days of just drinking from a fire hose. So we and our continuous improvement team just said, all right, what's the priority? What do they have to have the first year? They have to have curriculum, and they have to understand standards-based grading. If you don't know your curriculum and how to score, those 2 must happen. So we've pushed PBL training for new teachers to year 2. So a new teacher that onboards is not even going to get into PBL until we feel like they've mastered the Empower platform, competency-based, and the curriculum. It's second semester, first year, if they want to join the cohort, then we're going to structure it as a cohort where Rachel Crawford is going to go ahead and start delivering that in sessions, hour to hour and a half sessions, as opposed to a 6-hour day of training. They're going to do that training over time. Which I think will be more effective anyway, but that's besides the point. But we are restructuring some of what we're doing because we do have more resources and we have capacity, and we've had to figure out, all right, what fits where? You know, now that we can do that, what does that look like? But probably what you see on the plate for right now is what you'll see. The only, piece that's going to come on probably hard and heavy in the next 5 years will be CAPS. You'll see those programs develop out backwards. You know, we've got the internship piece, but what you want is some sort of pathway, you know, an entrepreneurship pathway with courses within that pathway, and then they do the internship. So because of, to your point, we don't have the teachers for those programs, you know, that'll have to be developed as kids' interests grow, and we can hire, you know, you get more kids, you get another teacher kind of scenario to grow those out.
Well, and on something like that, it might be beneficial to try to find adjunct, you know,
Yes.
people from the community that can come in.
Yes, and we will probably have to do that. I mean, even with some of our dual enrollment, we'll do the same. You know, the college will work with us on, you know, what that needs to look like, and you know, that's the beauty of community. You know, we use a lot of adjunct over at AICE, to plug in and help with some of that. And with FGCU building their facility out here, I mean, that's a game changer for us. That's, you know, that changes the total relationship. I mean, it's been a great relationship, but when you've got a facility that's...
Are they actually building it? I heard like they're thinking about it.
I think it'll eventually get here. Yeah. I think they want their name in Babcock.
So I have a question and then the back related to AICE but what are like the most beneficial things that we can do as parents to support the administration, the schools, the teachers? I think there's a lot of parents looking to support.
That's a good question.
The best things we can do and how can we spread that word? I mean, we're all here to do that, but what's the most effective way?
Yeah, so we actually have talked about that some as administrators. Like, how do we help the community understand, you know, the work and the importance of being a positive community? You know, I want it to be a positive community because I want people to move in and bring their kids to our school. I don't know the best way because I hear, you know, when people try to step up and say, you know, then they get attacked. You know, so I've flat told people, just don't do it. I don't know. I don't know really what the answer is other than the things that we can control. And what I would say is let the teachers know, like, what's going well. You know, not always what's going negative. We're always going to have things that don't go great. I mean, that's just the nature of life and work. But also controlling how it's said. I think just making sure that it's done with kindness and not in attack mode. You know, we have just, you know, it's just a different world right now. And the amount of attacking emails that we get just accusing us of things that are not even accurate gets disheartening. So maybe if you have a relationship with somebody that's doing that, being able to say, hey, you know, just call the school, or you ask why. I mean, a lot of times we can't publicly say the why, but if you ask, like, I can give you an answer, but like I'm not gonna ever go on Facebook and, you know, put, you know, we had a lockdown and here's what happened today, and that's just not, you know, that's the one that just continuously, you know, emerges. If we reported everything that happened in the school, we'd get nothing done. I mean, it's most of the time, by the time we investigate it and get all of our paperwork done, it's 5 o'clock anyway. So it's the day is done. But I think just encouraging, you know, that we're promoting our community, not just the school, it's the community. I worry equally about just the community. I mean, I had a friend that was like, you know, you talk how awesome it is, but like, what's going on? I'm like, well, you know, it's the same with school. You have 10% of the people who are never happy. I don't know how you're not happy here. I say that all the time, but you know, you got to find your joy. And I think as much as we can is just encourage people to exhibit kindness and find their joy. I wish I had a good answer.
One of the things I do is on my own page, hey, my kid had this awesome day and they did this project. And then people see like the positive things happening and then just the more positive that goes with, not even within the groups because those are just a hot mess, but just yourself, you know. And most of us are friends with a bunch of neighbors, and so just seeing more positive messages spread around.
Yeah. I think one of the things, because I know you had mentioned like our Google, you know, getting the Google feedback, like, because because I think there's like 4 comments, and it's actually one person who was mad at me over dress code who like changed her name and did like 4 different comments, like Krabby Apple's comments, which was entertaining because it's been a long time ago. But I think we've got to also encourage people, like when you have a good experience, you know, go on there. Or I talked about with Megan, I don't even think I brought this up to CJ, but even putting like a little dashboard out on our, you know, when people come in and drop things off, like, hey, would you do a review for us? You know, tell us what your experience was. Or, you know, it's a happy face to a frowny face. You know, how do we do with customer service? You know, we're here to help. You know, but you got to engage with us, you know, to help. And we're not always going to give the answer that people want. I mean, that's just, I mean, I call my insurance and I want a certain answer and I don't ever get what I want, but I still have to have insurance. And, you know, so I just wish people could understand that, you know, sometimes the decisions are made out of necessity and, you know, maybe they're not always the right decisions. We're human. I'm human. I mean, I certainly make mistakes. You know, but teachers are not intentionally trying to create issues for kids. I mean, nobody's trying to not tell information. You know, there's always another side, and there's always 2 kids usually involved, and so we have to honor both of those kids and respect, you know, both sides of every situation. You know, and I often tell parents, if your kid was the one involved, you wouldn't want me telling it. You know, you want to know it because you just want to know it because we're nosy people by nature. But you wouldn't want it to be known if it were your kid, you know, potentially. So I think we just got to slow down. I don't know how to bring kindness back, but I really feel like just being a nice human would be a great start. And of course, you guys are here, and that's the other part. You know, just, you know, engage with us. You know, come to the night sessions, come to the parent meetings. I mean, there's so many ways to plug in and just see the good. I think when you plug into that, you feel better, right? You just do. I mean, but I appreciate you all for coming today because I didn't think anybody was going to show up. And I hope it's helpful. I mean, the goal of this is to give you some information, connect some of the dots, and understand truly the why behind it. I think the why is so important, and I'm guilty of going so fast that I'm just getting the work done that I forget sometimes, you know, to articulate the why. So this was good for me to slow down and go, you know, like, here's why. Like, this is why we do, you know, standards-based grading. This is why we do Empower Learning. I hate that platform probably more than some of you. But it gives me a lot of information that I need, and it gives students a lot of information that they need, and there's no other platform out there that really does it like Empower does, and they've got some work to do too. They're constantly, you know, improving it. You know, but it's not that I, you know, love every component of Empower, but it's what we need to be able to get kids where they need to go, so that, you know, we've got to know for sure that when we put them in these AP and AICE classes that they've got the academic knowledge, you know, that they need to be successful. Well, that platform that's really good data for us to be able to gauge students on. An A doesn't tell me anything about a kid, really. It tells me they're compliant in most cases. In most cases, A's are just compliancy. All right. Well, thank you guys. As always, my door is always open, despite what people put on Facebook. I do call back and I do meet with people.